Today's show is all about American rights, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, and the right to vote. We'll take a look at what happens when those rights are blocked, curbed, or you choose not to express them. We'll hear from a local artist and activist who says a Facebook page landed her behind bars with her son removed from her custody. We'll hear from Shelby County Commissioner of District 7, Melvin Burgess, about balance between gun rights and safety. And last, we'll have our political roundtable with Smart Mule founder, Mr. Adam Guerrero, and the founder of OurPowerbox.com, Ms. Tammy Sawyer. We'll unpack what's happening this political season and give you our picks before you head to the polls. All this and more coming up on the agenda with Christian Kirk. We all take our freedom of speech very seriously. It's one of the rights that we all agree Americans should be afforded. But our guest today says she has had those rights stripped away. She says all from a Facebook page, she is now facing criminal charges and has had her child removed from her custody. Joining us in studio is Miss Pamela Moses. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you. Hi.
So, okay, a Facebook page started this whirlwind of trouble. How did this all start?
Well, the Facebook page didn't really begin the whirlwind. I'd say the federal lawsuit that I filed against the judge, that was the beginning of the problem. But the Facebook page, a community page, which wasn't just created by me, but it was supported by me and liked by me, is what caused this judge to feel threatened and terrorized. And the name of the page began as Do Not Re-elect Judge Phyllis Gardner.
And tell me about the federal lawsuit. What was that about?
It was about her violating my civil rights and falsely imprisoning me. And she was shielded by judicial immunity, something that I didn't know at the time that she had. But I felt I had pierced the veil of her judicial immunity because she was not acting as a judicial function. She was acting arbitrarily and capriciously when she instructed sheriff officers to just arrest me for no reason.
You filed a lawsuit in response to
her falsely imprisoning me.
Based on what?
She said that I was in contempt of court, but I was not before her. I had actually appeared before another judge, and she took the case and moved it to her courtroom. And when I was told to go in there, she just said, she's in contempt, lock her up.
So what was the initial case?
I was suing someone, and she found that out. And because she had a personal problem with me, she had the clerk remove that case from that judge and put it before her.
So why would she have a problem with you?
She's a former, at the time I didn't know this, but she's a former prosecutor who somehow became a judge. And she had done things to other people who were disabled that appeared before her as pro se litigants. And one of them had expressed some concerns to me about it. And so they had asked me, would I come and, witness how she talks to people. And I watched her talk to somebody very disrespectfully one day, even asked an adult, somebody that was 30 years old that was trying to get money back from where they were injured. And she asked them where was their mother and started threatening them and a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I told that person that they should file a complaint with the judiciary.
And so you think word of that got back to her?
Well, of course it did, because the person who filed the complaint listed me as a witness to the improprieties of the judge's actions. So she knew that, I probably had helped this person file the complaint, and she didn't like that because she's a judge, and a complaint like that, in the past, other people have filed complaints and judges have been censured, and some of them have been removed from office or forced to retire. And so when she found out that I was involved, that I'm a community activist, that I'm intelligent and I can articulate a complaint adequate enough for people to pay it some attention, she basically sought revenge against me. And her way of getting revenge against me was finding out when my next court date was for a matter, which was like the following week. And she had my case moved from Lynn Cobb's division to her division. And as soon as I walked in the courtroom, she tried to engage me. And then because I wouldn't respond, she told the sheriff she's in contempt, lock her up.
Because you wouldn't speak back?
I knew I was walking into a fire when I was in there, because I'm like, this case is not before her. Why is the case here? And, one of the clerks told me she requested it be brought to her. And so, I knew then that something wasn't right. And because I didn't have an attorney at the time, I knew that something bad was going to happen, but I never thought it would have resulted in her using her power as a judge to tell sheriffs to lock me up in a civil setting. We're not talking about 201 Poplar. We're talking about 140 Adams. And so when that happened, you know, I ended up getting hurt, and that's what precipitated the lawsuit. And
you were hurt how?
I was hurt, you know.
Physically injured?
Yeah, physically injured and a lot, you know, and I can't just necessarily blame it on the sheriff as much as people like to blame things on the police. I don't blame this incident on the sheriff because they were just doing what they were instructed to do by the judge.
You think they were instructed to rough you up?
Of course. I know they were. But they didn't know at the time her orders were illegitimate. She's telling them somebody's in contempt. Well, they're just thinking I've done something disrespectful. They didn't know that she was using her power to manipulate the situation, and that's what took place. And as a result, I filed a lawsuit. I filed complaints, and I couldn't get any because I had a head injury. It was hard for me to, articulate the things at the time when I was filing the complaint. I just really didn't feel like I was getting any justice. So, like my mama told me, when you can't get justice from the police, the district attorney, from, the
justice system, yeah.
You take it to the court of public opinion. And so that's what I did, along with other people who were upset about what happened to me. And we talked about it, and we said that you should not reelect this woman because she's unethical. She uses her power to abuse not only poor people, but people who are unrepresented, by counsel.
So everything else aside here, a Facebook page about a public figure who's an elected official is not illegal. Did you make any contact with this judge at all via Facebook, via the internet at all?
I didn't make any contact with her. The thing that she said, which was stalking, it was because her picture and her name was being used, and that it frightened her because she was getting calls from people who were seeing it. And some of those people knew me. Hey, we were in the same circle. The same people she knew, I knew, because I was on the Shelby County Democratic Executive Committee. She came there seeking endorsement, and she was denied that. So the same people who she knew, I knew, and they were seeing these posts about her being unethical, her being, impractical, and her being a mean person. And at the time, I felt like I could say what I wanted to as long as I wasn't saying anything that was not true. That's what my constitutional law professor told me.
Oh, yeah, in terms of libel.
He said, as long as it's true, that's the only defense to something someone considers to be defamation.
It's true. And she loses the benefit of being a private citizen by running and serving in public office, which makes her a public figure whom you can critique again, like you said, as long as it's true. That's the law in regard to defamation and libels. So I don't really understand where these stalking charges come from. That's what's puzzling to me. And maybe she can come in. There's an open door to you, if you're listening, to come in and talk about where this all stems from, because we want to get both sides of the issue.
It's when you have people like that with that type of background, they can manipulate things, and they can make people who, I guess, owe them favors do what they want. She had got the TBI involved in this.
In what aspect? What were they doing?
They were investigating me after I went to the Department of Justice. That's what everybody kept saying. Well, you need to contact the Department of Justice
to get someone from the outside to come in. Was that the goal?
It's a joke, because the Department of Justice here, I guess, is headed by Attorney General Edward Stanton. Edward Stanton's father is the General Sessions Court clerk. He's elected here in Jackson, and he actually was there the day that I was falsely imprisoned, and he's a witness to it, and he knows what happened. And I guess because he was a witness and his son was the attorney general, it kind of presented some type of conflict. And they basically, because he wants to be judged now, they sided in what was in the best interest of this political machine, which is hidden, that we really don't know about. There are people that run this city that we don't know who they are. People can have certain things happen and you not know why they happen and not make any sense. This person had made any contact. Well, I owe this person a favor. They say it happened. We're going to say that it happened. And in defense of the situation, there was a judge, there was a former attorney general that came down here from Nashville, and he knew that this was not right. And it was obvious from the hearing.
He knew that what wasn't right. What
they were
this?
doing. This was when they had the hearing. After I sued her, she tried to get an order of protection against me to stop me from talking about her on Facebook, to stop me from posting things, you know. And so they did. This hearing was supposed to take place in October, then November, then December. He was supposed to be here on December the 19th. And on December the 17th, he agreed to continue it to February the 9th. And on December the 18th, that's when this fictitious indictment came about that I was stalking her.
Do you have a printed documentation of him agreeing to continue it?
Yeah, I got emails. He agreed, and they agreed. Marlene Iverson, the lady who heads they have a task force for people like me. I later found that out, where the county attorney goes after intelligent, outspoken, I guess somewhat radical individuals who present a problem to the county, and Marlene Iverson heads that. And some people she tries to call sovereign citizens, which I'm not. I'm an American citizen, and I'm very proud.
So that's
to be.
A label you think that they put on people who are pose a problem to try to turn public opinion against them?
Yes, to make you look dangerous. Every county building that I go into, I have to be escorted by the sheriff. They've never given me any reason for it. And
fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so I have to do a little housekeeping here. Are there any reasons that they would have to see you as a threat? Is there any history of mental illness on record?
No. Okay. I mean, I had postpartum just like a lot of women after having my children. I mean, in the past, I have a past like anybody else. Before this happened, for the past like 17 years, I was a law-abiding citizen. I voted. I wrote music. I worked. I was self-employed. I helped people. And I became a target just because I stood up to someone who was being mean to people. And they were not only being mean to people, but they were being mean to disabled and, you know, illiterate people. And I have a problem with that. You know, I don't care that she's a judge. I watched her mistreat someone and talk to them like they were a third-class citizen. Yeah. And it's hard for me as a person, as a Christian and a human being, to sit and watch that. Even to this day, you know, I just feel like my assignment in life is to help people. And it gets me in trouble, you know, my mouth. And, you know, I'm sorry. I'll probably go to my grave as that person who just wouldn't stop. But
okay, so that moment, that standing in court and watching what you saw as injustice, the way that these people were being mistreated, and you went, okay, I have to do something. Did you know that you would be put down as a witness by the person that asked you to come in that complaint?
Yeah, but I mean, I never thought that it would result in me being retaliated against.
That's what I was getting to
next. You know,
yeah.
I knew that they were going to quit. I mean, yeah, you know, I didn't have no problem about it, you know. It's just that I just felt that it needed to be done to protect her, because the judge was threatening her and she was telling her things, you know, that were not true and were not. She had stepped outside of the scope of her judicial function and the things she was saying. And, you know.
In what way? What do you mean?
I mean, she was just saying you can't be associated with people like Miss Moses. You can't file things by yourself. It's illegal for you to file things by yourself. When you can file things by yourself, it's called pro se. And that's what makes me the biggest threat to Shelby County, is because I am a pro se litigant. I think my lawyer said you're the most notorious pro se litigant that he's ever seen. And I've been other places. I've been to California. I've been to New York. And their system is set up to try to encourage people to be pro se, to cut down on the attorney fees. And it's like Memphis is threatened by that, because if you look around, there is more attorneys in Memphis probably than any other city in the world. Why? Because they benefit and profit through the ignorance of people who do not know or understand the law. Just simple things. They may just need to get a garnishment or something, you know, taken off or adjusted, and they have to pay a lawyer $500 to do that, when they could just fill out a form and get it done themselves, you know. And I just like to educate people on how to educate themselves, and they don't like that.
Okay.
You know?
Fast forward to now. What is the current situation?
Well, right now, today is my birthday. You know, usually I try to spend my birthday doing something for myself, but, you know, right now my heart is got like a hole in it, because my son, who was there from the time that this injustice happened, he has now been taken away from me and given to someone who is a drug addict, or was a drug addict and has had absolutely no involvement in his life, because the powers that be are trying to teach me a lesson. And because they couldn't take anything else from me, they couldn't take my sanity from sitting in jail for 5 months.
5 months?
Yeah, 5 months.
And your son was there and witnessed the arrest?
Yeah, he was there when they came, and they literally tried to take the door off as if, Osama bin Laden was in there or something. I think that they may have killed me if my response to them wasn't so professional. When I saw what they were doing, I opened the door and I said, "How may I help you, officer?" And that's when whoever was in charge decided, "Hey, put that up. This is not necessary."
What did they have at your door?
Some type of batter ram.
The big metal log.
Yeah, they had a shield. They were in camouflage. It was as if they came for war.
I'm going to be honest, even on the local news here, all we heard was that this lady has been stalking a judge. So it made it sound like you were this crazy lady in the bushes, and nobody knew the backstory. So this is really interesting to hear.
Never been to her house. The only place I ever been that she's at is the courthouse, which I guess she thinks she owns because she want to try to keep me out of it. The judge did tell them that they couldn't keep me out of the courthouse, that I would have to be escorted when I go in there, which was fine. But to be smart, they want to try to escort me to every courthouse, even though it's only supposed to be, the parameters is that courthouse. I never been to her house, never called her, never texted her, never emailed her, never contacted her on Facebook, nothing.
Never made her address public or anything on Facebook?
Only in the federal pleadings, which you have to through certificate of service, but that's public record. You get it off the property assessors, but nothing directed towards her.
But right now, your son is taken out of your custody and has been given back to his father, who's not had him. And he's how old now?
He's 7.
And he's been away from you for how long?
Right now, he's been away from me since it happened. I was able to see him until the father saw that I was trying to get him back, and then he started making up all these lies and trying to keep me from getting him. And so right now I can't see him at all, because recently a circuit court judge granted me a writ to get him back. And when the judge who I'm involved in this matter with, her friend, I guess Dan Michaels and David Walker, realized that they had been overridden by a higher judge, they sent the police to my house at 4 a.m. to try to get him back. And when they finally realized that, these are legitimate papers, she went about this legally, they left at 9 a.m. but they kept us up from 4 a.m. They jumped the fence, tried to kick the door in, but my father came and let them in, because the first time they came to get me, when they arrested me, they didn't have a warrant. To this day, we haven't even been able to adjudicate if the grand jury really met, because the day that the grand jury supposedly signed this indictment was the same day they picked me up, and every criminal defense attorney in Memphis said that is impossible. Judge Beasley recommended bail, but I was held 35 days with no bond, no bail. People were looking for me in the computer and they couldn't even find me, even though I was in jail. And
so all of this started for trying to speak up for some people who were being mistreated in the court. That's your stance? On
Facebook.
Yeah. How do you see this being resolved? What would be the resolution from your standpoint?
At this point, accountability. I don't really know how. I know God has a way of fixing everything. I don't know how this will be resolved, because this is bigger than me. This goes back to a pattern of corruption that has been going on since before I was born. So, I don't know how you combat corruption other than to expose it. But all I can say is that I believe that the truth not only will set me free from all of this, but it's going to maybe lock a few people up. Because she didn't do this by herself. There were people who actively participated in this conspiracy. Some of them didn't even know that they were enlisting, or that she was enlisting them. They were just looking out for her because they believed her. And I mean, if you were at court that day when she testified, she said that she would rather have a cup of coffee with a death row inmate like Jesse Dotson than me. That's how dangerous she perceived me to be, and the only person that covered that actual hearing was Janice Broach of Channel 5, but she came in on the end, so she didn't really get to hear everything. But she's very convincing in her fear, but her fear is of her conscience, which bothers her because she knows what she's done. I know what I've done.
So you feel like these people, she's acted criminally in the proceedings with this?
When I was sentenced, because, I was forced, they told me, if you don't take this plea, you're going to sit here. And if you don't take this plea today, you're going to be put in solitary confinement. I even have that. That was drawn up by Bryce Phillips of the district attorney. He's since been censured by the appellate court. But that was the predicament they put me in.
Was he censured because of this?
No, for something else. Hopefully he will be once the truth comes out. But he basically told my attorney, if she doesn't take this plea today, we're going to put her in solitary confinement, which is 23-1, like a death row inmate. They were holding me on a $500,000 bond that was then reduced to $220,000.
$500,000.
$500,000
from a Facebook page.
From a Facebook page. No violence, no threats, no blood, no knife, no guns. My bond was almost as high as Jesse Dotson, who killed 5 or 6 people. And all of this because her friend Jim Lammy set my bond. He was allowed to set my bond, but he then recused himself as well, along with all the other criminal court judges here after they started realizing something is not right about this. Yeah. They didn't want to leak coffee. They didn't want to get involved in it.
So where do you stand with things with this judge now?
The criminal charges?
Yes.
Well, they're on at the Court of Appeals. My attorney withdrew the guilty plea because it was coerced. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I'm just hoping that the truth will come out, because even when the judge that sentenced me, he asked them, what evidence did Miss Moses tamper with? Or when did she do this stalking? Like, what dates? They couldn't even tell them what dates that this stuff occurred. They just knew I wasn't going to take the plea, but I took the plea because I needed to get out to my son, and I wanted to see about my mother who had a heart condition. And it's like, my mother, she still got to have this procedure, but she's scared to have it because I'm still going through court. And now I don't have my son. So it's like I basically was forced to plead guilty for nothing,
Well, the accusations here are very troubling, and we do hope to get to the bottom of this. If any of the people involved in this case are listening and you'd like to come on and give your side of the story or talk about this case, we invite you to do that. Miss Pamela Moses, we thank you for coming and sharing your story. And it is my hope that the truth does come out, that this issue is resolved, and that this show serves as a platform for you and any other citizens who are facing what they perceive to be injustice. Thank you again for joining us. In the wake of an Oregon college's mass shooting, again, the issue of gun control has come to the forefront. Here to help us sort through the issue is George Boyington of Boyington Consulting and Commissioner Melvin Burgess of District 7. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Why is it that every time a mass shooting happens, gun control is where the conversation starts? Why aren't we looking at other things?
The guns are the tools. They used a gun to commit these acts, so we need to do something about them. That's a logical start.
Okay, but then the fear of pro-gun people is that they're going to use this as an excuse to come and take away our guns. Is that a valid fear, Commissioner Burgess?
It's valid. It could be yes and no. And of course, we know the plague that's in our inner city when it comes to gangs. And you got young kids going to schools who are trying to protect themselves from gangs and other issues, and they're carrying guns. Having a gun now is just like going to buy a bottle of water. Everybody has a gun for protection.
But is it that common? Does everyone have a gun? Because it seems sometimes that the good guys don't have guns and the bad ones do.
Most people can get a gun, and that's where their problem is. A lot of criminals can legally purchase firearms, and so too can the mentally ill who are unstable. They can just go and get them.
And what I would say is you have some form of protection at your home to make sure that your family's protected. So I think, that a lot of people do have guns out here, but just don't tote them around and don't wish to do harm. And like the other day in Southeast Memphis, a young lady got shot 7 times in her home. This was about 2 days ago. And look at Chicago. In the inner city, our kids are being wiped out due to guns, shot, murder, homicides. And something has to be done. Just on the sidebar here, my father used to be the police director of Memphis, and he went to Japan to look at their community-based policing. And the so-called mayor of Japan, whoever their leader is, said that Japan was alarmed because they had 16 murders. Come on, Japan only had 16. And one comment he said was, my dad told me, he said, America has too many guns. And that's why we have the issues that we have here in this country.
But guns have always been a part of American culture, and we only seem to be seeing this increase in violence in recent years. And we've actually had more restrictive gun laws in recent years than we have in the past. Still, we're seeing this uptick in violence. So could there be other factors we should be looking at and considering primarily other than gun rights?
Well, I think it's our type of weaponry that we have on the streets. Back in the day, you didn't have a machine gun. It's the fact that you have weapons of mass destruction that you can carry in a briefcase. We've been an armed country for 235 years, but the fact that we're now able to carry something that can wipe out whole buildings full of people in one person, that's where I think the issue lies.
So, Commissioner Burgess, your focus isn't necessarily on the people who have guns in their homes for protection, but you're putting your energy into getting rid of these weapons of mass destruction, as George described, right?
A little of both. Exactly right. I know it's a hard discussion. I don't even think, people like to even bring it up because I know the politics behind this is always politicized. And I know the president made a comment the other day when he talked about it that we need to start with doing something and we need to start putting something at the table. Can we, at the state level or here in Shelby County, come up with something to try to at least strengthen, try to do something about it? Of course, there's going to always be some negativism as to say, well, that's not going to do anything about it. That's not going to do that. But we have to start doing something because it's wiping our community out.
Where do you propose we start?
I think we start here in our city and here in Shelby County and come up with something, some kind of legislation just to see what can we look at and push it at the state level just to protect our kids. When I was coming up, we did drills on tornadoes and storms. They're doing drills now on people coming to building mass shooters coming in. So there's some mental issues also, too, of people who are getting hold of guns. So.
We always hear those two things coupled together, mental illness and gun control when we witness an event like this. But, there's also, I think, an indictment on the media that we're taking in. For instance, the video games that kids are playing for hours on end, these real first-person shooter games that are very realistic and gruesome in the way that these acts of violence are being committed. And also, we're seeing a lot of psychotic and sociopathic behavior being displayed in many of the characters that we're seeing even on children's programming. And it desensitizes adults and children to violence. And a lot of these shooters that we're seeing now have come up in this culture. Do you think that has an impact?
Well, we forget cowboys and Indians. Children used to play gangster. They had the click pistols and things like that. Mm-hmm. This has been out for a while, so I'm not necessarily sure if it's our culture, though I do think that it has a role to play in it, but not as significant of a role as some people would like to kind of push.
But, in Cowboys and Indians, you're using your imagination. You are, imagining a scene. It's not like this very immersive, realistic environment you're in when kids are playing games today.
Point taken.
What about you, Mr. Burgess? Do you think that has an impact?
Well, I think it does because if you noticed, even on television, I promise you, some of the movies you like watching on television, I bet you have something to do with violence, gun violence. Mm-hmm. It does. And, it's entertainment. I mean, it's America.
Absolutely. When you talk about the repetition of these messages, you're hearing them back to back on television and on radio, these really violent songs, really violent images on rotation. So I think it does have an impact, but we'll leave that alone. For right now, where do you want to see gun laws go? Right now in Tennessee, we have open carry, so you can have a loaded gun in your vehicle, and you don't have to have a permit to have it. And I think that was enacted in 2014. So keeping that in mind, where would you like to see gun laws move toward?
Well, I definitely would like to see a restriction on the types of weapons. Like I said, some things are not needed for hunting and or home defense, which is what the justification for having a weapon is. I would also like to see a restriction on the types of people who are allowed to carry firearms. Criminals should not be able to go and get them. Repeat violent offenders, domestic violence abusers, they should not be able to just go and get a gun. The doctor should also to have a role in restricting your ownership of firearms. If he feels that you have tendencies towards violence, licensed medical professionals should be able to notify the state that you should not be able to have access to firearms. I think that would do a great deal to curb the violence. A lot of these mass shootings, they are perpetrated by known criminals or known persons with mental illness. And just getting that subclass of people away from firearms would do wonders for safety for the community at large.